Thank you, Sergey, for the introduction. My name is Leah Molatseli. I'm head of business development at Legal Interact, and I also sit as an advisory member for the Global Legal Tech Hub. So I'm absolutely elated about today's session. So we'll be focused more on Africa, and I'm joined by some incredible speakers from across the continent. We have Ade, we have Eric, we have Neema, and a return player, Zohar, is joining us again. If you could introduce yourself to the audience, I will start with Eric.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the warm introduction. My name is Eric Kariuki. I'm the head of the HiiL Innovation Hub in East Africa. What we do is we find, fund, and support entrepreneurs in the justice space who are trying to solve the world's most pressing justice problems. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you.
Thank you. Neema.
Thank you very much, Leah. My name is Neema Magimba. I am an advocate practicing in Tanzania. I am here as one of the co-founders and the head of legal for Sheria Kiganjani. Kiganjani is a Swahili word that translates to law on your palm. We are a platform that's enabling over 41,000 Tanzanians access justice easily and affordably through their mobile phones. I'm very happy to be here and I'm looking forward to a very vibrant discussion with you all. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Zohar.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for having me for the second year. I'm really happy to be here. In a nutshell, I'm the founder of a consultancy company called World's Legal Marketing. We're located at the heart of the startup nation in Tel Aviv within Israel. We have our legal tech department called Tech and Law. We are the Israeli ambassadors to ELTA, the European Legal Tech Association. And happy to say is that this year we're having the annual European Legal Tech Association conference physically, finally, in Tel Aviv. And I'm looking forward for this discussion.
Perfect. And lastly but not least, I didn't forget you, Ade.
Hi guys, it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Adedunmade Onibokun. I'm a lawyer and I live and work in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm also the founder of Legal Naija. We're a startup company that is providing legal tools to individuals and businesses. I feel to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me once again, and I look forward to our engagements here today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so, so much, everyone. Now let's get into it. Eric, I mean, HiiL does such incredible work, but a lot can be said around the funding, that is pumped into legal tech. So, how do you see investment taking place in legal tech on the continent?
So, one of the key trends that we definitely see is that globally, since the mid 2010s, there has been growth in terms of legal investment. I think the biggest, this is looking at globally, I think the biggest as of last year, it was 1 billion worth of investment in legal tech. The key challenge, obviously, is that majority of this funding is in it's in the States and other parts such as Europe, where you're seeing the sort of the flow of the investment. In Africa, we haven't seen a lot of growth in terms of investment. Grant funding is more ubiquitous in terms of essentially you find from donor partners who are working in the space, but also a lot of angel investment has come in on board to try to support the legal investment space in Africa. But still, we're like, apart from HiiL, there are only two other sort of main funders that we do see. That's Invelo in Ventures in South Africa and then the Catalysmic Ventures. So I would say positive, some growth, but still a lot has to be done across the continent to take legal tech investment to the next level. Thank you.
Perfect. Now, for just a follow on before I move on. So, for the African funders that are joining in the founders, and any foreign investments that are looking to invest into this particular sector, what would you say are things they should be looking out for, or things that founders should do to make themselves more attractive?
Okay, so this year when we launched the sort of the Innovating Justice Fund to try to attract more investors into the space. And the feedback we often get is, okay, what is the commercial value on legal tech in sort of in Africa? So what we noticed that how legal tech is playing out in Africa is that you have sort of the legal, this sort of systems or tech systems that are used in law firms to either it's e-discovery or e-research. There's some sort of systems that are interfacing with clients or customers on the other end. Um, what we recommend first is, so one, we need to prove the commercial value, and that means a focus on the business model, not just on the law domain. How is this, what's the dollar value for this growth? Two, for tech adoption is how do we grow the skill set and talent for the founding teams? So we often see that uh, you have two domains, the domain experts, so the legal person, and then we have the tech person who's brought on board. But sometimes what we miss as a secret sauce in most of these teams is the business. Where's the business talent? Who has the, the who understands the investment cycle, who understands the investment language, not just the legal term sheets of, oh, this is what a term sheet entails or what should look for, but actually how to make business. And the thing is also on an external level is how do we move this traditional formal legal sector towards adopting tech, adopting innovation. Because sometimes what you find the biggest barriers is actually the formal legal system where law firms are reluctant to adopt technology. Law societies, which are sort of quasi regulators, are very protective or have protective policies against tech. And then also, a judiciary that is still working on, a paper based approach. But that's sort of in sort of that legal practitioner. The other thing is around building trust and confidence on the customer user base perception. So this is normal, ordinary people who still see legal sector as a very elitist, very not very connected kind of space, and how do you get that basically on board? And then lastly, for I think for everyone, is how do we minimize barriers to scale these legal startups? So yes, you're formed in Tanzania, you're formed in Nigeria, but how can you uh, scale across the different countries in the continent? um, Appreciating that there are different legal systems that are borrowed from a colonial past. What's used in the French system may not work in the Anglophone system or in the Lusophone. And how do you actually find minimize things around tax incentives? Because these are the things that make a case for investors in terms when they're looking at the viability of the end product or the end solution. Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so, so much. Well, I've learned something. You mentioned a bit of government, involvement, or court system involvement, which then brings me to you, Ade. Like, what role do you think that the government and court system can actually play in encouraging tech adoption?
Well, if you ask me, I believe that both the government and the high courts or the court system have a huge role to play. And I'll give you a brief example just from what we had to experience here in Nigeria. So, after COVID, or should I say during COVID, when there was a lockdown here in Nigeria, there was a lot of issues as regards to access to justice, and it got so heated that I mean the debates got so heated that there was a call for lawyers to also be identified as essential workers so that they could also go out and continue the business of providing justice support to users. At about that time, the courts were not well equipped to actually provide virtual hearings. at least most of the courts. I would say maybe about only 2% of the courts were well equipped to be able to provide virtual hearings. And I can remember having a discussion with a judicial officer at about that time. And I asked, okay, how are we going to go about virtual hearings? How is your court system going to approach adopting virtual hearings? And the person told me they were still having a lot of problems with virtual hearings in their court because there was the issue of funding. There was a problem of funding. They were asking themselves, okay, who's going to provide the data that I'm going to work with? Do I have support staff that are well versed in technology and how to access some of the tools that will be used in virtual hearings? So those were a lot of problems that we had. Also, we had in fact, at a point, we had to have the Supreme Court step into it because there was also the issue of the legality of virtual hearings, and the Supreme Court has to make a pronouncement on that. So I've talked about from the court angle in regards to funding, in regards to providing the technical know-how and skills to the officers in this court system who will be providing, should I say, support services in the courtrooms when these virtual hearings are going on. And where the government comes in is also stemming from our experience. We had a roadblock, or we had a block at the time when we were trying to get virtual hearings to be a thing, and I'll explain further. So, like I mentioned, the Supreme Court had to pass a decision on whether virtual hearings were legal or not, and whether they were acceptable by virtue of the rules of evidence. And yes, the Supreme Court held that that virtual hearings was indeed legal and it could be adopted. Now we hit a setback when the National Assembly was supposed to inculcate all these decisions of the court and all the engagements that the public had on the subject matter to inculcate it into legislation. But sadly, when it came up for voting at the National Assembly, um, the vote was not passed. What I meant to say is that there was not enough votes to pass the legislation of virtual hearings being included in the laws of evidence. So that's where the government comes in as well. As you can see, they served as, should I say, a stumbling block in order to allow virtual hearings to go forward in the court system. So there really needs to be a lot of further engagement and also promotion of the advantages of virtual hearings. As a litigator myself, I know the advantages that virtual hearings will definitely bring, not just to my practice, but also to a lot of people who are engaging the court systems here in Nigeria. But somehow the government seems to be trying to get back on its feet in regarding providing an atmosphere for startups to thrive. And why I say this is just last month, basically about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Nigerian president signing the law, the Nigerian Startup Act, which actually provides or seeks to provide a more enabling environment for startups to thrive in the country. Some of the provisions of the Startup Act is number one, it provides the startup label. So it provides that a startup has to be a company of 10 years or less that was registered within a 10-year gap. It also provides tax incentives for startups. It also provides provisions for training for startups and also establishes what I would call an association or a consultancy that is supposed to promote the clauses and the spirit of the law in itself. So, yes, generally, I still believe that both the government and the court system have a lot to do, have a huge role to play in ensuring that virtual hearings go forward, especially for us, and access to legal tech tools as well go forward. So, yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Zoha, we've spoken about investment, we've spoken about other stakeholders, like the court and the government, but I'd like to believe that legal tech is there to create efficiencies. And by design, it should increase productivity. I wanted to hear, your thoughts around why do you think right now it's important for productivity to be improved within the legal industry?
Productivity. It's a good question, and I think there's a long answer, but the short verse is COVID. COVID came to planet Earth and disrupted everything which can be disrupted, among others, the legal industry. And the legal industry was always traditional. There's a saying that we use in lectures from time to time that in the past 100 years, there are two things that didn't change. The first one is how attorneys work. They just use, instead of typewriters, are using Microsoft Word, and the toilets, the flushing mechanism of the toilet has not been changed in the last 100 years. So attorneys are super traditional, and a lot of legal tech companies and legal operations, legal design, ALSPs, which is alternative legal service providers, all of them were working and walking in a bit of a darkness because the sky weren't opening up to all of them. A lot of the things were, I am a law firm in South Africa. Why should I work with a legal tech company based in Düsseldorf in Germany? I am a law firm based in Morocco. Why should I work with a legal tech hub located in Durban in South Africa, and so forth and so forth? But COVID came to the world, and all of a sudden, the geography was not an issue at all. And I can give a personal perspective from the new law company. One of the companies we are working with is LawFlex. LawFlex is a, once again, alternative legal service provider. Prior to COVID, they were around 250 attorneys. Currently, 800 attorneys. And it's not just because they're doing a good job or not. It's because geography is not a thing. And after the first halt of COVID, because all the illegal industry came to a halt, because nobody knew if legal fees are going to be paid, in which currency, what's going to happen to the bank, what's going to happen to the world. And after the initial 1 or 2 months, when law firms and in-house general counsels looked to the right, looked to the left, and said, "All right, everything is working as usual. We're working remotely, of course, but we are working as usual." And it's not just that we are working as usual. We had incline in the legal works that we need to provide. If it's about securities and capital markets, so a lot of the companies and law firms needed to do a lot of changes and amendments and reports to this different securities authorizations. If it's about labor law, you had so many attorneys dealing with labor law issues. If it's maternity leave cover, if it's unfortunately letting employees go, or it's reducing, how do you make any kind of assumptions or management of employees who are tens of kilometers away from you? And same goes for litigation. All of a sudden, people and businesses had time and I said, all right, I need to make any kind of money. I need to increase my volume of work. What am I going to do? There is this litigation which I didn't want to sue, but now I'm at home and I have time. I'm going to make this lawsuit. So the legal representation all around the world had a very large incline in the amount of work getting in. And then both law firms and general counsels remembered, all right, remembers that we had in webinars, sorry, webinars was after COVID, in seminars and in conferences, we read a lot about this whole legal tech thing. And if you're an in-house legal department, you more about legal operations. If you're a large in-house legal department, you maybe have someone doing legal ops that you used up until now just to find a few software. If you're a law firm, you're rushing, you have a 100-meter dash towards legal tech products because everybody are at home, and the fact that you have a fountain in the middle of the office with birds around and chocolates, doesn't nobody cares about that anymore. Your clients are sitting at home, they're not coming to meetings, they're just using Zoom to communicate with the partners. So how are you going to differentiate yourself as a law firm if you're a dispute resolution partner? How are you going to differentiate yourself with all your competitor? And all of a sudden, the answer was, among others, not just legal technology. We saw it here in Israel. We saw it in a variety of countries we were working with. So that you had managing partners, especially, and then partners in specific practice fields, rushing in order to gain momentum with their clients, saying, "We are working from home. You're sitting at home. What we're going to provide you is a better service, a more efficient service, and a technology-based service." And it worked. And all what the prophecy said all of those years that legal tech is going to be the thing, COVID-19 pushed it forward uh, for decades. It minimized the time that would take decades to 2 to 3 years. And currently, this evolution, which became to a revolution, cannot be changed. And I think now it's the best time for legal tech entrepreneurs and companies to take the idea they had 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and to try and run with it. Because this is the time for legal tech companies and entrepreneurs to run. Productivity is the go to thing, and legal technology means, among others, productivity and efficiency for the legal sector.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Now, Neema, I mean, Zohar gave such a great insight around, the impact that COVID had. And, as you correctly said, some of the consequences of it was an increased interest in legal tech. But I wanted to hear your thoughts around the innovation side of, the core business model in the legal industry. Do you think that has changed? Have you seen any changes? And is it really keeping up with the type of legal tech implementation that we're seeing?
Thank you very much, Leah. And I would say absolutely yes. COVID did not just bring an increased interest in legal tech. We've seen disruption and innovation in the core business of in the legal industry. So, like Zohar said, historically, the legal industry or legal practice has always seemed very conservative and attached to the traditional modes of practice. But the pandemic came in and disrupted pretty much most of what we considered normal, and the legal industry or the core business models in the legal industry were no exception. So before the pandemic, legal practitioners and lawyers and law firms, especially in Tanzania, were very slow to adapt to different forms of legal tech solutions, and they were very stagnant in their old practices. The conservativeness in itself in the practice made it difficult for any room for innovation or to give any room to innovation. But with the pandemic changing everything, including how lawyers interact with their clients, how law firm in-house teams interact and work on clients' matters, even how courts deliver services. Because for Tanzania, let's say, it came to a point where the courts had to now reevaluate how they would provide the services and think about coming up with virtual court sessions. So this necessitated a change in the core business model of different practitioners in the legal industry. Again, especially in Tanzania, where legal tech is just now being recognized and utilized, we are witnessing law firms and law practitioners actively look for innovative ways to and new cross-cutting edge ways to just continue to stay relevant and allow them to continue to remain relevant in the market. So I would say that yes, the pandemic brought about disruption and innovation in the core business model of the legal industry. We also now see different law firms or practitioners leveraging on available legal tech solutions. Some are even going a step farther. They're employing or contracting tech specialists. Some are hiring in-house tech teams to innovate and come up with different solutions just to ensure that their industry or their business remains to stay competitive. We've seen in the post-pandemic era, we're seeing virtual lawyers, we're seeing virtual law firms, teams continue to work remotely. We've seen changes in law firms' online presence and how they can market themselves. So there's been the pandemic brought about a disruption, of course, pushed or necessitated innovation in the core business of in the legal industry. And I would say that this disruption that was brought about by the pandemic could be taken or considered as a positive catalyst, because I think it has, speed up the adaptation of innovation in legal tech by a profession that has always been considered to be conservative. What I would say is that yes, there are trends that we are seeing. There are different practices that we are seeing that were forced by the pandemic. I just think we should continue to build on these new changes and advanced innovations in these practices. But the pandemic did bring or necessitate changes, especially innovation in the core business of the legal industry.
Thank you so much for sharing. If I can just add my 2 cents worth, though, what we're seeing, particularly in South Africa, there's like a ripple effect in terms of the market pushback towards actually innovating in terms of your pricing model. So finding law firms actually testing out value based pricing. We're seeing pushback from in-house teams actually putting pressures on lawyers like, hey, I want to receive my information differently. And that means there's a lot of key parts that actually need to be put in it, inclusive of pricing specialists that are actually employed within law firms. So that's very interesting intake. So just something for anyone who's looking. What are your like? What are some of the key legal tech stacks that you can recommend for every lawyer? I'm gonna start with Eric. I haven't heard from you in a while. Let's start with you.
All right, thank you so much. Actually, before I jump in, I just want to make just a little bit on the investment side as well, because I like money and I like impact, and when I find those two, I'm wonderful. So one of the key things also to note, as much as there's been growth, looking at sort of the Q2, this is looking this year of half year of 2022. Um, Generally, we are seeing also a slowdown in terms of investment, not just in legal tech, just generally across all innovation. Partly, it's economic recession that is sort of stepping in, and sort of the UK European crisis with Ukraine. So there is a sort of a downturn in terms of investment, but this is just in terms of the number of deals. So investors are still happy to invest, but they're not investing in as many company. But at least the ones they're investing in, they invest in a lot of money. So so for me, it's a good prospect on one hand, but also a cognizant of the times that we are facing. But not to answer into sort of the stack that you need. I think one, productivity and efficiency is a key thing, and getting sort of the tools that enable law firms and legal practitioners effectively deliver their services. One key thing. The second one is around, I like to use, in the social enterprise, we call last mile delivery. How do you get your services delivered to your end users in a more nimble way? And this looks at, because one of the biggest markets, I always feel like law firms don't, we talk about top tier, middle tier, low tier kind of law firms. But what we do notice with all these tiers is that how many of them are serving the large aspect of the population who predominantly can't afford your services. So how do you ensure that you're able to still manage costs, but have a last mile delivery component? And then lastly, for me, is in terms of designing your solutions, the key point is how do you incorporate scale? And scale means how do you incorporate language options that you can provide these legal services not only in your predominant language. There are many languages spoken in Africa, over 2,000, but I'm sure there are couple of six that are more or less ubiquitous in different sort of sections of Africa. But apart from language, it's also how do you make the legal language easier and easier to use. I love one of my startups in South Africa. Um, Creative Contracts has done a very good job in creating contracts in comic form in order to make them accessible to a lot of illiterate people, and these are sort of farm hands or work, who basically drive the economy of the South African farms, and how making just an employment contract that user friendly has made tremendous change in reducing sort of disputes within between employers and employees. So looking at sort of that flexibility in how you deploy your services across the continent. Thank you.
Perfect. And Zoa, what are your thoughts around? I mean, lawyer comes to you and is like, "Yo, give me my legal tech stack. What should I have?"
Uh, I would ask them to stop for a second and not necessarily run for the usual suspect. Uh, I'll tell you why. There are so many legal tech companies and components and entrepreneurs that are rushing for big data solution to use artificial intelligence and do manipulations on large chunks of information and into e-discovery, into contract review, and so forth, which is excellent, which is amazing. But for a law firm, I would start at the basics. I'll give you an example, and anybody who is watching us, it's a free of charge advice. There is a small thing with law firms that's called write down your billable hours. It's a very, very simple thing. People that are not attorneys are not going to be able to understand that because it's so simple. If you're an attorney and you're working by the hour, you need, by the time you finish your task, you need to sit down and write how much time did it take you to do this thing, this task, and what did you do. So it's a number. I worked 2 hours and I wrote an affidavit for so and so. That's very, very simple. In the legal profession, for a variety of psychological or for a variety of reasons, a lot of the attorneys, sorry, the majority of the attorneys are not writing down the hours. So we're coming to a scenario in which by the end of the month, when accounting needs to send the information to the client, someone is asking the attorney, listen, you didn't write down your hours for the past month. What did you do? And the attorney doesn't remember what he did. He doesn't know what he did, and he doesn't know exactly where's the client, when, why. He doesn't know anything. And then the attorney needs to sit down and try to have any kind of manifestation of what did he do? What the hell did he do? The bottom line is a waste of hours, a waste of money, and a waste of income, which is not coming from thin air. It's an income, well-deserved income that the law firm should get from the clients. If a legal tech entrepreneur, any entrepreneur, is going to be able to provide a good enough solution for the attorneys to write down their hours on spot for a variety of things, this is a legal tech component that a lot of law firms will use on a day-to-day basis. The next stage is, and there are legal tech companies working on that, is software and algorithm which understands what the attorney is doing and writing down the billable by itself. It's finding out what the attorney is doing for what case. So it's write down the hours very, very accurately, and he writes down exactly what the attorney did. Those are very interesting solutions and algorithms which are doing that, not necessarily in the whole languages, not necessarily all around the world, but it's very interesting. But there are two ways to solve this thing. And once again, try the basics. For example, writing down hours.
Absolutely. Well, guys, you hear it from the man himself. Nima, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, as much as I acknowledge that there are so many different legal tech solutions that have come about in the recent years, and there's so many solutions available for a lawyer, I am with Zohar on this. Let's just start with the basics. If you're a lawyer and if you're a law firm and it's 2022 and you're still manually issuing invoices, or you cannot track time that you're spending on one client's matter, or there's no document automation within the firm, that's an issue. So I would say for a lawyer, if you want to stack up on legal tech, start with the basic. Have a practice management software. This is something that could be one solution that would cater to all of your needs. Within that software, you could have all your clients' contacts on display and accessed by every lawyer within the firm. You could be able to automatically generate invoices, track the time that you spend on a client's matter. Um, it could also have enable internal and external communications, let's say between the firm and the law and the clients. Um, it could also have access to financial data, and just to advance this, you could also have a client portal within that client management or practice management software, which would enable a client to be able to have access to their files without necessarily going through that back and forth email threads just to get to know the status of a client's matter or a client's issue. Just the basics of it. And if you're a legal tech entrepreneur, or someone who wants to get into this space and you want to innovate around something like these things that would enable lawyers to be able to work more efficiently, especially in the post-pandemic era, I would say, especially for Tanzania again, I would say start with the basics. As we have, most of the speakers have said and I have said as well, the legal industry was a bit conservative and traditional, and things are just now changing. So there's still some work to be done with the basics. So I would say if you want to stack up, start with the practice management software, incorporate a client portal in it, and you're good to go.
Absolutely. Ade, I mean, you sat there, you heard everyone. I don't know if they're taking you as screaming. what, what are your thoughts, you know? What can you tell a lawyer saying,
Yeah.
I'm looking for a legal tech stack?
Okay, great. Before I even make a comment about that, I'll just like to also support what has been said earlier as regards the how lawyers are embracing legal tech actually in their practice. So I've realized that lawyers are very comfortable with legal tech platforms that enable them to manage their practice, right? But when it becomes, or either tech platforms that enable them carry out researches easily, but when it comes to legal tech that is providing easier access to the user, I realized that there's been a bit of friction. When I mean the user now, I mean the person who's not a lawyer, the person who comes to a lawyer for services. There's been a little friction in that regard. And why I say this is I'll use our company as an example. So one of the tools that we have on the website enables users to generate agreements from the templates that we have in about 5 to 10 minutes. And of course, it costs a fraction of the amount it will cost to instruct a solicitor to create such agreement in the first place. Now, we believe that there is a huge gap of people who don't have access to agreements for their small businesses because they cannot afford the legal fees. That's why we provided these tools. But we got a lot of feedback from some of my colleagues who are lawyers as well, who are saying they don't like the fact that we have that tool. They don't like the fact that we are making this agreements and templates easily accessible to users who might just want them, and they feel that we're taking a little bit of money from their pockets. So I believe that lawyers actually need to embrace legal tech that also allows users, that is people who are approaching the justice system, to be able to access easier, should I say, representation, either they're having a lawyer having to come to their aid or having to get agreements by themselves. So I think the market is calling for this, and lawyers need to appreciate that and also move towards that. Secondly, I think a lot of the speakers here have already mentioned a lot of points in regards to what slacks a law firm should have. The only thing I would just like to add, which has not been included, is of course, I believe every law firm wants to be profitable, and having the technical skills does not actually result in automatic, should I say, profits. You know, you also have to market your services as well. And marketing is something that many lawyers were not really taught in law schools. And I believe that if you can, as a lawyer or as a law firm, have a tool that can provide more visibility for your practice, I think that would really be good. And also, if you can have a tool that helps you save time on drafting, for instance, a tool that helps you cut your research time by over 90% or 40% or whatever percentage that tool can offer, I think that would be great as well, just in addition to what has been said already. But like I said as well, everybody has made very fine points as to what slacks lawyers and law firms should have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, okay, so I'll just add, yeah, legal research, practice management, fee tracking, billing, and then from an in-house, definitely contract management solution. Matter management solution is also quite critical. I mean, that can be broken down into a different number of things. I know some in-house teams that solely really love the intake process, digitizing that. So it really is dependent um, on your specific needs. So I'm going to close off today, and I wanted to thank everyone for making the time. Really do appreciate it. I learned a couple of things. For one, is that investment, it could be better, but yeah, at least it's getting there. And thank you so much, Eric, for sharing your insights around what is possible and what should be done around actually founders positioning themselves and adding that secret sauce on the business element side of things in their startups. Thank you, Zohar. I really appreciated your insights around the productivity and the impact that COVID has. Neema, once again, thank you. I really appreciated your insight in relation to the innovation side of what we do in the legal industry in our business model. And Ade, I think I'll always save you for the last. Thank you for sharing the key importance of really getting all the stakeholders involved. I think people get lost when it comes to legal tech. They think it's just about lawyers, but it's not. And I think that's where we fall short against fintech, because fintech says we are banking the unbanked, so they're all for the people. And I mean, I think it's just sometimes a messaging perspective to say it's actually for the people. It just so happens it's used by lawyers. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. And now we're going back to the rest of the programming with GLTH Day.